My next guest is remarkable not only for her obvious intelligence and not only for the way she articulates her message so clearly, even in a language that is not her first, but she has expressed such amazing courage standing up to the mob. I'm really delighted to introduce the Crowdsource the Truth audience to Elizabeth Rogliani. Elizabeth, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, thank you. I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. And you know, I just saw you for the first time the other day on TikTok. You put out a video. Maybe what I should do for people who perhaps haven't seen it, we could just play a segment of that video right now, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Let's do that. This is an amazing thing, and I think people are going to really want to listen carefully.
Why do I even worry about some silly little statues coming down or some silly little street names changing? Why do I care? It's because the last time I didn't care about this, I was a teenager. I have already lived through this thing when I was living in Venezuela. Statues came down. Chavez didn't want that history displayed. And then he changed the street names. Then came the curriculum. Then some movies couldn't be shown on certain TV channels. And so on and so forth. You guys think it can't happen to you? I've heard this so many times. But always be on guard. Never believe something can't happen to you. You need to guard your country and your society or it will be destroyed. We didn't believe it could happen to us. Us Venezuelans, Cubans warned us. And we're like, Venezuela, we know what freedom is like. That's not going to happen here. Yet it happened. And there's clearly a lot of people wanting to destroy the U.S.
So I think a lot of Americans probably haven't been to Venezuela, which is remarkable. It's pretty close, but you would know better than me. What prompted you to put that video out, Elizabeth?
Everything was hitting a little bit too close to home. The video was very spare of the moment. I wasn't expecting it to reach as many people as it did. I only had maybe a few hundred followers at that point on TikTok, where I just created TikTok to express my political views. I needed a platform to express my opinions without as many followers as I had on other platforms that knew me already for other things. So I just wanted to say my point of view, and that video went viral, surprisingly enough to me. I felt that the statues coming down, the religious symbols being attacked, and everything just seems too similar to what we already lived through in Venezuela. Christopher Columbus statues were taken down. Then religious symbols were decapitated as well. The police was taken apart in 2001 and replaced by new police.
Whoa.
So it was just all seeming very similar to what we already went through. Of course, in a different way. I understand America and the United States has a different system, but we cannot underestimate people that are so willing to destroy it, because they've obviously studied the United States. They know their laws and they know where to attack. They're not in government right now, at least not in the highest office, but they clearly want to get there. So I don't know. I wouldn't underestimate what they can do when they actually get there. Mm-hmm. If they actually get there. Hopefully not.
You're not in politics or anything like that, right?
No, I mean, politics has been pretty much centerfold in my life since I was a kid, but I never wanted to be in politics. It was just sort of a thing that I informed myself because I grew up talking about politics. I was in 5th grade talking about Cuba and what happened in Cuba, and me and my classmates would comment on how, in Cuba they had a dictatorship right before they had Fidel Castro, and he took power in a completely different way. So we would just talk about how it was not going to happen here, even though there were so many warnings from Cubans that left their country to come to Venezuela to seek refuge. And they told us, we sort of naively said, Venezuelans, we know that what freedom is. We've had a strong democracy for a while. That's not going to happen here. And we just sort of reassured everyone, at least people around me, because I was still a kid when this all started.
And I think a lot of people, well, let me rephrase that. I believe that the United States played a role in the destabilization of Venezuela. Do you have any insight into that?
Uh, I'm not sure I would agree. What would you say to that? Do you mean like the sanctions?
Well, there's sanctions, of course, and obviously the petrodollar and all the, pressure that's been put on Hugo Chavez when he was alive because of all the oil in Venezuela. It seems that any country with oil is either taken by the United States or given a lot of problems by the United States.
Right, but the United States, Venezuela has had oil for a while now. Everyone has known about this. This oil in Venezuela. We had the oil boom early in the 20th century. So, and our economy was really strong because of it. So suddenly, out of nowhere, the United States wants our oil when Chavez takes. It doesn't make sense to me. And he
Meaning
he
what?
came
The
in.
United States was not that interested in Venezuela before the discovery of oil. Is that it?
Maybe not. Before the discovery of oil, maybe in the 19th century, but in the 20th century, throughout Venezuela and the U.S. were pretty much friends. They were friendly, and our economy was strong. The lives of citizens was, I excuse my English. Our salary was 3 times our neighbor's salary, so a lot of
Huh.
people were trying to go to Venezuela, and it was a safe country. We could just close our door without locking it, and you were safe. So things dramatically changed when Chavez came into power. So to say it was the United States, it's a strange
Got
thing.
it.
Maybe the world played a role because no country isn't a complete island that is not influenced by outside forces, of course. But he did this to us. Like this policies that he put in the country are what ruined the country.
Got it. And so when you grew up in
Mm-hmm.
Venezuela, when you were a little girl, who was a president that you looked up to that everybody thought was a great guy or
Well, when Chavez was elected, I was maybe 7 years old.
oh,
So I wasn't thinking about politics much. I had heard about Romulo Betancourt, Carlos Andres Perez. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, but in 1992, right before I was born, um, there was a military coup against the president-elect, who was Carlos Andres Perez then. And he was pretty much doing stuff that a lot of the political class didn't like. He was privatizing a lot of the industry that was previously from the government. So the
huh.
political class did not like that. And there was a coup d'etat against this president by Hugo Chavez. A
Uh-huh.
lot of people died. 300 people were killed. Hundreds of Venezuelans were killed while he was trying to basically assassinate the president and his family.
Wow.
He didn't achieve it then. He went to prison. But then the president, after Carlos Andres Perez, took him out of prison, basically said, you know what, you're forgiven. And that was a big mistake, in my opinion, of course. Everyone thinks
Right.
it's.
It's interesting to hear because, again, I think a lot of Americans don't really know very much at all about what's going on in Venezuela. Certainly, I don't. So Chavez brought in socialism. He wanted to nationalize all the oil and all that. I mean, we've
Yeah.
heard in the news that Venezuela had just an incredible decline of the economy. You couldn't buy food. People were killing each other to eat pets. Were you already out of
Yeah.
Venezuela when that was going on, or can you describe the decline and your departure?
Yeah, how do I say this? I When all that started happening, when it was really bad, I was already out of Venezuela. So I left Venezuela in 2008. But I continued going back every year up until 2014. But every year, because I was not there and I would come back, I would notice a difference. When you're there and
Right.
things change, you don't notice as much.
Right.
So when I went back every year, I noticed these places that you used to be businesses, thriving businesses, were abandoned, or homes there no one was there. And then there's an island that me and my family used to go to for vacation, Margarita, completely abandoned. The animals were disappearing from the zoo in Caracas. It just everything started going very strangely, and what I used to look at as a thriving economy, even when Chavez was there, I didn't notice it. I didn't notice the decline when up until the point that I started going back, and I didn't see it, and then I see it a year later, and it's a completely different city.
It's pretty scary to see. And so what was happening with the animals? They were just dying and they couldn't care for them in the zoo, or people were breaking in to eat them?
Well, I'm not sure if I should tell you this.
Tell me.
Podcast.
Yes.
I don't know. I can't certify what happened for sure, but there's a lot of rumors of strange things happening with these animals. Um, I when I heard it the first time, I didn't believe it, but every year, every time, it sounds like it's true. So there was a priest that was a huge advocate for Hugo Chavez. He loved him. He believed he was for the people, and he was a public figure on Twitter. I don't remember his name, but he left Venezuela and he now lives in the U.S. I think he was from this city called Maracaibo. And yeah, he was a huge advocate for Chavez. So he got invited to the presidential house. And he said what he saw there was sort of some rituals with animals taking place. And so he was a little bit more descriptive than I'm being. But you can imagine.
Blood rituals.
Yes. Rituals, sort of things that aren't holy. This was a priest coming into a house. When he sees this, out of the corner of his eye, he vowed to never return again. He completely left the party and started saying what he saw in that house. And I can say that while I was living in Caracas, and I remember my family also commenting on this, there were people walking around the city every year, more and more, that were wearing all this kind of white clothing. And I remember my mom talking to my uncle about it. She said, why do I see more and more people wearing all this? Like what? And he said, those are santeros, which are sort of like a witch thing.
Like Santeria?
Yeah, Santeria.
Whoa.
And that started happening more and more in the city. She said, I never saw this before. Yeah. Exactly.
Wow. And I'm so glad that we're meeting you, because this is stuff that we haven't heard about and don't know about. So even NBC News was reporting back in 2008 that Venezuelans were increasingly turning to Santeria. I don't know that much about it. It's an occult religion, black magic, right?
Yeah, exactly. Wow. It became more prevalent during this time of Hugo Chavez, and the destruction of religious symbols sort of goes along with it. He also stood very firmly against Israel. And when priests would basically call him out, he would say he was gonna shut them down if they didn't shut up, basically. And we had on Easter, every year on Easter, the national TV channels, the ones that you didn't have to pay for an extra fee. They would show, this typical religious movies that stopped every year on what we call Día del Descubrimiento, which is the discovery of the Americas, which for you guys would be Columbus Day. Everyone we would have a day off school, and then maybe there was a fiction movie shown about the discovery of the Americas. That's it. That stopped as well. So when I started seeing all these specific symbols being attacked in the United States, it was worrisome to me, because those represent to me the Western culture, the union of Europe and the Americas. So it's not just coincidence. No. This is specific to attack these symbols.
Right.
And
we had Sean King calling for the destruction of statues of Jesus Christ. I don't know that Jesus Christ was a racist. It's a strange thing that they would want to eliminate those.
Exactly. Religion doesn't have a place in Marxism, really. At least not Catholic religion.
Right. So you've been living in the United States. How long have you lived here?
I've lived here since 2010.
So it's a fairly long time, and
fairly long.
What was your impression when you came here versus life in Venezuela?
Well, I mean, I've been traveling with my family since I was young, so I sort of could adapt easily. It wasn't a shock to me in any way. However, I came here for college, and I always expected to go back. I always thought, this is just going to be a passing
Back to
thing.
Venezuela, right?
Yeah, I always expected to go back. I was going to come here to college, maybe do a year working, and then go back. Obviously, that didn't happen.
Hmm.
The storm is still there. But what I was happy about was that I could freely walk outside and not feel like I was in danger all the time. You
It
know,
seems to be changing lately, though, here.
yes, right now it is. Especially, I mean, I live in New York. I'm not in New York right now, but I'm not feeling super comfortable with going to New York right now.
I'm with you. I'm in New
Hmm.
York right now, and I can tell you
You are?
it's not very comfortable. Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
I've been
wow.
walking around just trying to, get the real truth of what's going on. Since the coronavirus situation began, I've been doing it started out with daily walks, but as it's become more and more unpleasant and increasingly dangerous, I've slowed down the frequency a bit. I mean, I'm sure you've seen on the news, although maybe not, they haven't really been showing it as much as they could or should. But most businesses are shuttered here in New York, even though we're on supposedly phase 2 of the opening.
Well,
There's just a tremendous amount of businesses that are closed. And as I speak to people who I know who run businesses, they're just increasingly telling me that they have no intention of reopening them. Restaurants and
well,
things, Fifth Avenue is all boarded up. And I mean, if you try to engage with any protesters and ask them their opinions and insights, that just very, very quickly turns hostile. And frankly, I've been
hmm
assaulted a number of times,
yeah, I
physically.
can't say I'm surprised.
Yeah.
I can't say I'm surprised at all. I mean, I remember when I first came across people that had these types of views was in 2014 in the United States. I never thought,
What type of views you mean?
very, very left, very, very left-leaning views, very much about communism, socialism, blaming every evil of the world to the United States, which I think it's strange to me because it's sort of hate for their own country, but at the same time, this sort of arrogance that no other country has control over themselves. It has to be manipulated either badly or to the better by the United States. So basically, we're just living there, and the United States
We're
is
in charge of
manipulating
everything.
like
Right,
puppets.
right, right,
So I
right.
don't appreciate when people are, you guys would have been fine if it wasn't for us interfering. No, no, no. Like we screwed up when we elected Chavez, for sure. Um, in 2014, there were protests nationwide in Venezuela calling for Maduro's resignation, and the protests turned global. And so a lot of Venezuelans that were abroad were going in the cities. They were like getting together in their cities and their plazas. And I remember going to a lot of these protests in Boston because at the time I was living in
Ah.
Boston. And there were always people that would come to our protests and sort of counter us and tell us that we were in the wrong, that Venezuela was actually a great place, and people that would wear the Che Guevara shirt.
Huh.
It was just amazing to me that people would believe that I was lying, and yeah, like everyone's just living a great and happy life back home, and we just don't like the president, so that's why we're protesting.
It's weird that people in Boston would. I mean, I'm telling you the truth. It's not like I know that many people who have ever even been to Venezuela. It's. I mean, South America in general,
Yeah.
surprising. Many more people that I'm familiar with have been to Europe and other places. But you talk to people about Brazil, Venezuela, they just haven't been there.
No, I mean, and it used to be a place where there was a lot of tourism. I meet friends, my friends' parents these days that are from all over Latin America, Europe, and they said when we were young, it was cool to go to Venezuela.
Right.
I wanted to go. Like the friends that I have from Argentina or Puerto Rican, my friends, their parents tell me I went to Venezuela for a graduation trip, and that's unthinkable these days.
Right. This would be like taking a trip to your death sentence or something. So
Yeah,
this
exactly.
this situation here where there was a drone attack on Maduro, do
Yeah,
you know anything about that? I mean, it seemed mighty strange.
I heard about that. It might have been real, you know. I mean,
Uh-huh.
there's a lot of people that want him gone. Obviously, he's completely destructing the country more and more every day.
Mm.
But there's also part of me that is suspicious of any of these things that Maduro does. Like just recently, there was a supposed coup against him backed by the United States, where people just came in this little fishing boat to try to take out the president of Venezuela, and I was like, that seems like a sham to me, and another ploy to sort of distract from their own failures and blame the United States,
Hmm.
because everything that goes wrong in the country, apparently, it's never their fault. That's the thing with this government. Anything
Right.
that happens that they like the people are complaining against, oh, it's the United States. We can do no wrong, even though they've made themselves millionaires through
Right.
this whole process.
It's an interesting point that you raise, Elizabeth, because there is a lot of deception on both sides, and it's like, intelligence operations and counterintelligence operations and counterintelligence operations. So from your point of view, there really is nothing improving about the situation in Venezuela.
No, not at all. Unless they actually manage to take them to leave government and persecute them for their crimes, it's not going to improve. They don't want it to improve. They just want to stay in power. They created their own little utopia and taken out the middle class for the most part, keep
The
the people
government
poor.
leaders are sitting on top, and this is socialism. Everybody is poor, and the guys in charge have all the
Exactly.
control.
Exactly right. Because socialism doesn't work unless the whole of the population agrees to it. So a lot of the middle class either left or they got impoverished. They got squashed by these politicians. So now a lot of the population is there, for the most part, is very poor, and what they want is to find their daily bread, to find food every single day. They can't actually organize a rebellion against the government because they're too busy trying to worry about
Trying to
their
survive.
day to day. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously the strategy, I would think, of tyrants who want to install socialism and take over. I mean, the other thing that we heard in the United States, and forgive me for the ignorance of this, but
Yeah.
we just don't get that much information. We heard about hyperinflation, where a carton of milk was like $500. How could anybody live there for a week, even if, I mean, a carton of milk should be $4?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people that can't afford going into the black markets, because that's what people are doing now, or trade with dollars, they go and scavenge through the trash. There's a lot of footage of people just trying to find food in garbage trucks and saying, very humbly saying, Maduro, I appreciated what you were trying to do, because they still believe in him. They still believe in
Really?
this revolution. And they say to the camera, I believed in you guys, but right now you're just not doing a good job. And I never in my life had to go scavenge for food in the trash. And that's
So
what's
I didn't
happening.
know anything about this black market. So this is a currency black market,
Yeah.
and they're trading U.S. dollars.
Exactly.
See, that's interesting. 7,336 bolivars. That's an interesting exchange rate. Wow.
Yeah.
So do you still have family over there in Venezuela that you're in regular touch with?
I do. I had my grandmother there,
Oh my
but
gosh.
basically, like, all of her money has been transferred here, and my mom is basically paying the help that she's getting, because she couldn't do that from her end. And my aunt, my uncle, and my cousin, they're still there. Everybody else left.
And what do they say while they're there? How is their
They
day-to-day life?
they hate it. They have to go line up for hours to get gas. They barely get any water to their house. Every day is a struggle, and they're in good standing socially. I would say middle class or upper middle class, at least my uncle and my aunt. But every day it's like, how are we gonna get water? They go shower somewhere else, to a gym.
Wow. And so
Yeah.
why do they stay? Is it financial difficulty in leaving?
Yeah, they don't have the visa situation. I mean, they can come here for tourism, but it's
Aha.
also a problem. And because of the COVID, Venezuela, the government of Venezuela loved the COVID. It was
Why
a
is that?
great way to
They
keep
could lock
people
everybody down.
locked in. Yeah, it was perfect, perfect,
Huh.
perfect.
Wow. See, and I think that the United States government or certain people in it probably enjoy that as well. I was watching a press conference. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo this morning was giving a press conference talking about sanctions that they're putting on actually ship captains, Iranian ship captains that are bringing gasoline to Venezuela.
Yeah.
I mean, this is why I said the United States is messing around with them, because I feel like there
Yeah.
probably are some difficulties. You know, having oil is one thing, but refining it into usable fuel is something else that requires an infrastructure and workers and all
Yeah.
that. So Pompeo was
Yeah.
saying that Iran is bringing gasoline, not oil, but gasoline, and so they're trying to cut that off. It sounds to me like the United States doing this to Venezuela is going to make your aunt, your uncle, your cousins have less gasoline and make their life even more difficult.
No, I see your points. The thing is, Venezuela is an oil producing country. Our whole oil was cheaper than water at some point. We were
Wow.
producing it from the beginning to from the beginning to end. But they've completely destroyed the oil industry. Completely. They took over it, and now they're blaming the United States, of course, because they wanted to import oil from Iran, which doesn't even make sense. Venezuela is an oil producing country. They've destroyed the oil industry, so that's why they need to import oil from Iran. Yes, the US blocking the oil coming in is going to make trouble for regular citizens, but at the same time, they brought it to themselves. They want to blame the US for everything. It's sort of a tactic. I understand that some people are not gonna like it if these governments are sort of playing games with each other, but it's a tactic to kind of choke them out.
Right.
They didn't need to import gasoline from Iran. Like, you guys have a country that produces it. Why do you need oil from this other place? Because they just destroyed the industry already.
Right.
So
And when you
yeah,
say they,
the
you mean the
sanctions.
Venezuelan government
The
destroyed it, the
Venezuelan
socialists.
government destroyed it. And that was like another thing that happened in the early 2000s. That the men that were in the PDVSA, which is our oil industry, got fired. All of them sacked by Chavez because they wanted their people to control the industry. And that's when we started seeing more protests against him.
I see. And what did you think when Donald Trump invited, is it Juan Guaido?
Guaido.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it shows some solidarity from Trump to the democratic process in Venezuela. Guaido, according to our constitution, would be president based on, I don't remember exactly what happened, but I remember studying this and looking into this. And Nicolas Maduro was elected by fraudulent elections, and therefore whoever was president of the National Assembly became president for the de facto, like for the time being, until we elected another president. But of course, the armed forces are under the control of Maduro, so that's a little bit harder because of the armed forces are. Yeah, it would be complicated. But Guaido, he's not gonna have what it takes. Really, I'm sorry to say, but this is not the person that's gonna lead the country.
So you said earlier that you created the TikTok account to put out political views, I presume because, much like me, when you make the kind of shift that you're talking about, I was watching some of your other videos earlier today, and you spoke about when you first came to the United States, you were fairly liberal yourself, and then all your friends are sort of very, very left-wing, and so saying all this stuff, have you lost friends?
I've lost acquaintances,
Got it.
I would say. I've lost people that I was friendly with, and they just unfollowed me when I started posting stuff, or unfriended me on Facebook, which is fine. I'm actually planning on unfriending quite a lot of people after November 4th.
It's an amazing verb that we've got now, this unfriendly,
Yeah.
so unfriendly.
Exactly.
But it's a real serious problem, and I have to thank you. I mean, I was just absolutely blown away by you putting that message out. I mean, you hit it right on the head. I've had a similar problem too. I mean, my career before I started Crowdsource the Truth really had nothing to do with politics, and I was in LA. You've lived in LA. People are very left-leaning over there. They hate Trump.
Yeah.
They love the Clintons. Yeah. They will not listen to any of these facts. And just in our conversations leading up to this interview, I was asking you some questions about the Weather Underground, and it's totally understandable that you're not that familiar with it. I knew nothing about it until just a little while ago, but it's something that I'm trying to help people learn more about, because not only are we seeing it replay itself in our streets right now, the founders of Black Lives Matters have said that Joanne Chesimard is their mentor, their ideological idol, and the inspiration for Black Lives Matters. And she is a convicted murderer, a fugitive from the law. She shot a cop. She was essentially the queen of the Black Liberation Army. And that is where the defund the police, the prison abolition movement comes from. And I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, Elizabeth, but for me, abolishing prison, I mean, they've sort of already started it, right? New York announced they released a lot of prisoners for fear that they were going to get coronavirus, while simultaneously going around and arresting people for not wearing the coronavirus mask. It makes no sense.
Makes no sense whatsoever. And they have really no regard for the law. I mean, and that's where I see the similarities between what happened to us and what happens to you guys. You have these people that are criminals that don't care that they're criminals, and they're fine with putting these people in power. We had the same thing. Every person that was important in our government had a rap sheet.
Wow. So,
yeah, I mean, the current president now, he met Chavez in prison.
Oh. That's unbelievable. That's amazing. Yeah. So, see, in the United States, we do it a little bit differently. They just forego prosecuting the criminals and allow them to go directly to government. At least in Venezuela, they get some time in jail so they can learn some stuff. Exactly. So, I mean, we're laughing at everything now, but obviously it's very, very serious. People are concerned as we go around. We heard the other day that they were going to dismantle this Chaz, whatever they've got going with the autonomous zone. You posted a video earlier today of someone who is obviously seeing the problems that you're pointing out, and it was sort of single-handedly trying to dismantle it. But I have not heard that this has been actually taken down, and I'm becoming increasingly concerned that the longer these types of things are allowed to go on, the more other people around the United States and elsewhere become emboldened to try to do the same thing.
I mean, you have these politicians that are letting this happen, which is why I think if they're capitulating to these criminals, because that's what they're doing. I'm sorry to say, but they're criminals. So what they're doing is actually against the law. And these Democratic politicians are just sort of appeasing them. And I don't know if you saw the video where I basically mentioned with Winston Churchill's quote that says an appeaser is an appeaser feeds a crocodile in the hopes it will eat him last.
Ooh, that's a good quote. You know a lot of quotes. I like that. I agree with you. It's already, I think, in some regards too late, because just when I was walking around the other day, I saw people speaking to cops in ways that I haven't really seen them do before, because ordinarily people are just sufficiently intimidated by the concept of being arrested that they just won't even go there. In fact, I personally think that's one of the most important aspects of the police, is to just be a deterrent to crime, their presence. If people think that the cops are tough and going to arrest them, they don't want to do a crime. If they think the cops are never going to do anything, they just go and do whatever they want. I had a situation where I told the cops I was just assaulted right over here. There are two homeless people occupying the fountain, and they didn't want to do anything about it.
Yeah. I mean, it all seems studied. I mean, that's the feeling I get. It all seems like they planned how they're gonna destabilize the country, making sure people are suspicious of the police, against the police, so it won't be a deterrent to crime anymore. Demoralizing the country by making sure they vandalize and decapitate and knock down symbols of the nation. I realized initially they were just going after Confederate statues, which they weren't really. They also started with Columbus, Christopher Columbus, but they've been going after religious statues, Miguel Cervantes, all the founding fathers. I mean, it's obviously a show of we can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
And you guys won't stop us. And we're spitting over the symbols of your nation, or over your heritage, and you won't stop us. Like, people, it's a way to put everyone else down.
Yeah. And intimidate the public, make people afraid.
Exactly.
I mean, you were talking about demoralizing the public. I think they've demoralized the police as well. They don't even necessarily need to defund them at this point, because they're just so essentially useless. In Madison, Wisconsin, just 2 nights ago, there was an attack at the state capitol where the statue of a very renowned abolitionist was torn down, dragged through the streets, and thrown into a lake. I think a state senator was physically assaulted, punched, kicked, attacked. It's absolute bedlam, and the mainstream news continues to refer to the individuals involved in this as protesters. Yeah,
it's ridiculous. They're criminals, not protesters.
They're insurgents. This is an attack on the United States.
Exactly. What's that quote is it in the anthem, or foreign and domestic?
Oh yes, enemies, foreign and domestic.
Enemies,
yes.
Foreign and domestic. Well, these are domestic.
That's right.
And with the aid of foreign governments, because this is not just people inside.
I agree with you.
Other governments are actually putting their hand. I know for a fact the Venezuelan government has a hand in it. How
do you know that?
Because in the protests in Miami, they caught some people that were in the Che Guevara International Coalition reunion in Venezuela in February. So these people were in that reunion that were shaking hands with President Maduro and whatnot. They came here and were inciting violence in the protests. So to me, that's a clear indication. And then at least what I read in the news, they were caught and they were interrogated, and they confessed to have been put on planes and paid to do that by the Venezuelan and Cuban governments.
Wow. And so now we see the Miami Herald had a story about this where I'm sure everybody probably made fun of Trump for saying this. It seems amazing to me. He says things like, hey, is there any way we could use UV light inside the body to cure coronavirus? And everybody says, that's ridiculous. Trump is out of his mind. And then some scientist shows a method of putting fiber optic light inside the body and using UV light to kill viruses.
Yeah.
So here we see the White House did claim on June 5th violence was incited at the George Floyd protests, and it's linked to Venezuela's Maduro. And, this causes me to remember what William Barr was saying in an interview with Maria Bartiromo. He said that there was a witch's brew of extremist groups. So certainly if you're Maduro and you don't like the United States and there's unrest like this, it's pretty easy to send 5, 10, 20 people, a couple cities in the United States, give them some money, give them some, guerrilla warfare training. And all you got to do is go into a crowd like this and smash a bottle over somebody's head, and suddenly it's a giant fight.
Yep, exactly. And also, I know, based on the sanctions that the U.S. is imposing and how they're being harder on this government than the previous administration was, they don't want the U.S. sort of coming down on them, because the previous administrations were always complacent when it came to totalitarian governments in Latin America. This one hasn't been, so they don't want him there. So of course, if they can help to destabilize a country in an election year, they're going to do it.
Right. Right. And so you spoke about destabilizing the police as well and bringing in new police. What was the difference between the existing police and the new police?
The existing police that we have, at least, doesn't do anything really. The impunity rate is 98%. So if a crime is is it impunity rate? You know, crimes and not being solved.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you have a family member that gets killed by the police, don't expect it to. It's sort of normal now. If you know someone that gets killed, don't even wait for them to find the killer. That's just not going to happen. Everyone's sort of used to this at this point.
Wow. And then, but before they brought in these new police, was it an effective police force?
It was safer. My country was a lot safer. People, I remember my parents, my grandparents tell me, like, we used to be able to go outside in our motorcycles. We didn't have a worry in the world. We would leave our door open. We would know no one would come in. The police was dismantled in 2001, PTJ, the National Agency Police.
And it says here that the Venezuelan National Assembly gave the government 1 year to create a national police force. It must have been chaos while they had no police.
Yeah.
Well, so now when you hear people...
So I was very shielded, but yeah.
So your life must have been quite affected by growing up. I mean, I'm looking at little kids walking around now with the mask, and they can't go to school, and they're sitting in front. I mean, if you're 5 or 6, and this is, I think back to the first day of first grade and kindergarten. I mean, that's where you meet all your friends that are hopefully friends for the rest of your life. Now we've got this society of isolated people. I mean, just tape an iPad to everybody's face and let them conduct their life that way. So when you hear people calling to defund the police in the United States, what sort of thoughts do you have?
The thought that what they really want to do is make sure they get rid of the police now and get the police under their control and put in their agents as police. Whoever controls the police, you know, controls the public, or at least the crime. Right now in Chaz, we can see armed people walking around. So that's the type of police that they want. More of a political police, in my opinion.
Now, did you see this tweet earlier today from President Trump? There was an interview with, I didn't know that there was a leader of Black Lives Matter. I was aware of the 3 founders, but this guy appeared and he said that basically the government needs to do what we want or we're going to destroy everything. And Trump fired back saying it was sedition, it was treason. What'd you think about that?
I mean, it's true.
It is.
I didn't know that I didn't know who this guy was either. But I did see that tweet and I heard about what he said. And of course, this is what him saying that is sort of a terrorist threat, isn't it? We're going to destroy the United States.
That's what it sounds like to me.
If you guys don't give us what we want, they're basically saying we're holding your country. We've kidnapped you, so just give us what we want.
And in your original TikTok video, you talk about street names changing as well. Trump is tweeting just a few hours ago that he's been told that Mayor Bill de Blasio wants to paint the fabled and beautiful Fifth Avenue right in front of Trump Tower with a big Black Lives Matter sign. And then he says, "Pigs in a blanket, fry 'em like bacon," referring to killing police in their chant. And this is this is from the Black Panthers, "Pigs in a blanket, fry 'em like bacon." These are the people I'm talking about, Joanne Chesimir.
Talking about police.
Right.
Well, if I'm referring to just the changing of the names, it's again an attack on the identity of the country. I know it seems mild, just some street names, but it goes like that. It's street names, and then it's also maybe a city's name, just like a slight change here and there. Our street names changed. the name of the country changed. It wasn't Venezuela, like República de Venezuela. It became República Bolivariana de Venezuela. They
Huh.
also added another star to our flag, and they changed the shield from a horse that was galloping forward, looking back. They changed it.
See, I was confused by that because when I was creating the graphic for today, I found these different versions of the Venezuelan flag, and I
Yeah.
wasn't aware of this one, so I kind of eliminated that little crest in the upper left-hand corner. Was that a good thing to do?
The crest has always been there.
Ah,
They just changed the crest. The
huh,
horse they changed it. I can't see it on the screen right now. But they changed the crest. Yeah, that one is running backwards.
huh.
Correct. So the original horse was running forward, looking back, and the flag had 7 stars originally. They changed it to 8.
And why? What
So
does that
it's
eighth star
all
signify?
apparently an extra state, which he actually gave away. So it didn't make
Ah,
sense to me. But it's
I
all,
see.
yeah, exactly. I always look at the flags of people and count the stars to see like what their political affiliation is.
Wow.
I'm like, oh, 7 stars. Okay, they're my people.
Uh-huh. So here's one with 8 stars and the horse looking backward. They're just confusing everybody.
Yeah, they're confusing everybody.
Unbelievable. Well, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to speak with us, Elizabeth. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience? Anything, what do you plan to do now that you've become sort of a viral social media celebrity?
I don't know. I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed by this attention I'm getting. I do have a couple of other podcasts lined up. I also got another request for TV, but I think at least I'm gonna space. If I do TV, I'm not gonna do it right after the other one because those ones that get really overwhelming, especially the next day. I get too many people. Um, I'll do some podcasts, see where that takes me. And it's funny how things change because just a few years ago now, I was telling you when we started the show, I didn't like Trump at all,
Right.
and that changed just by stages. One of which was, I think, in 2017 was the caravan that was coming in. Remember that?
Yep.
There was a
Oh, yeah, the
caravan coming
migrant
in through the southern
caravan.
border, and people in my school assumed I would be all for it. Like, yes, let's let people in because I'm Venezuelan, and I
Huh.
fully disagreed with just letting everyone in
Right.
because that's going. Then you just let go of your sovereignty if anyone can just come in and out of the country. I went through a process, and I think everyone should go through a process.
Mhm.
Um, so no, I fully disagree, and people couldn't understand that. So that's when I started seeing sort of this perception of what I had to believe based on where I'm from, which didn't make sense to me because for me, the left ruined my country. And being here started pulling me towards more the left, seeing, okay, like there's good stuff about it. But I think the right is a little bit better at defining limits than the left is.
And you know,
So,
Elizabeth, Heidi's got some
yeah.
questions about Florida. What's the lockdown like
About what?
in Florida?
Oh, it's not too bad. We
Yeah.
can, there's the restaurants are open. The beach wasn't open up until recently. The park right across the street was closed as well, but now everything is open. You just have to wear the mask. When you go to a restaurant, you have to wear the mask up until the point that you sit down.
So
That's it.
stupid.
So at this point, it's very similar to what it was before. It's just masks are being worn.
And we're hearing a lot of news just even in the past couple days that Florida and Texas, basically the countries that defied the lockdown or remained somewhat open, they're now trying to convince us that these places are having, you know, huge coronavirus outbreaks. It's amazing when they choose to update these stories. But I personally do not believe this concept of skyrocketing because let me rephrase that. It's not a matter of not believing it, but we say COVID-19 cases skyrocket. Well, what does that mean? I mean, if we test nobody and we say, well, nobody has it, and we test 1,000 people and 300 have it, is that skyrocketing? I'm more interested in knowing how many people who have it who actually become sick or die, because I'm talking to people who say, oh, I know somebody who had it, and I say, what happened to them? And they just stay home for a week and got better. So what the hell is the big deal?
Exactly. Correct. You're totally right. And by the way, I don't know if you've tried this trick already, but I did it the other day. I put in a 3-digit number on Google and then new cases, and I did it maybe 9 times with different numbers. And every single time I found an article saying 344 new cases of COVID. It was amazing. There you go.
Yeah. Somebody told me about this. Right. It's amazing.
Yeah.
How could it be? How could that be? So many things about it just don't make any sense. You know, I put in 333 and it tells you you've got that many cases there. Really, quite crazy. You know, and there's some more questions coming from the chat here. Are you aware of a journalist named Abby Martin?
No.
She's done a lot of reporting on Venezuela, and I guess she's really where I got the idea that the United States was messing up Venezuela. So I don't know, perhaps it's something we can look into a bit more.
Well, can I just say, recently someone made a TikTok with my own, like, duetted me. I don't know if you know what that means. Basically grabbed my video and put their own video next to it, kind of trying to correct me.
Oh.
But they weren't actually talking about my original point, which was the indigenous tribes that were killed in the frontier with Brazil. But they were saying how the U.S. is killing all these people in Venezuela because of the sanctions. And they had these numbers on the article. And I didn't reply to the duet because I didn't want to give it any weight. But here's the thing, and I'm going to tell you. The numbers, I have to look at who is measuring these numbers. How do you measure who's dying because of the sanctions?
Right.
You know what I mean? Who is measuring this? And the people that are counting the cases is who? Is it the FBI? No, it's the Venezuelan government. And they're the ones that are saying, oh, these people are dying because of the sanctions. And of course they're going to blame it on the U.S. And those numbers are grabbed by those who want to fill a certain narrative and say, oh, yes, it is the U.S. But that's just not the case. The people measuring these numbers are giving out the numbers and telling the story because it fits their idea of the Venezuelan government can do no wrong. You know?
Yeah. Well, and there's always controversy, right? And then, so the one last thing I wanted to ask you, because I meant to bring this up, you know, when I was preparing the show, I always like to let everybody know how they can find out more about a guest, and we wanted to display your website, which is it Eli, do you say? E-L-I, Rogliani? Sorry if I'm mispronouncing it.
Rogliani.
Rogliani. Okay. So if you Google, as of yesterday, basically, if you Google Elizabeth Rogliani, this webpage comes up. But today, when you do that, it doesn't, because I believe Google has decided that you are no longer somebody they want people listening to, because it was literally the very first thing that came up in search yesterday, and now it's totally gone. Now, this could be a result of so many people writing articles about you, but I found it strange that when I did the same thing on DuckDuckGo, you came up right away, and it brought me right to your website. What do you think of that?
It is quite strange. I hadn't Googled myself up until when you told me, and I couldn't imagine these articles that are coming on. It's bizarre to be.
Yeah. Well, we've spoken to people from Google, including Zach Voorhees, who said that they actively manipulate this. James O'Keefe and Project Veritas had a piece out today where they're talking about, I think, Facebook having people actually suppress the views of conservatives and frankly, anybody who goes against the mob, goes against Black Lives Matters. We've basically got bully thugs going on TV telling the government, you better do what we say or we're going to destroy everything. I mean, this is a threat. It's an open threat.
They best not get into government, because then they'll be in government if the wrong choice is picked in November. I'm not gonna say who,
Well, right.
but someone that is not pulling any strings right now, someone that isn't really in control, but will be controlled if they let him in. So
Yeah. No, I think people know exactly who you're talking about. He's the masked bandit who's got a propensity for sniffing. But I mean, in terms of being in government, I think that people are starting to realize that there has been an infiltration of the government going on. You spoke earlier about Venezuela,
yeah,
how they got people into the right positions in government. Right now,
exactly.
in Minnesota, where George Floyd was killed, Keith Ellison is the attorney general. He's a proponent of, or I should say, a fan of Sharia law. And he was accused of beating two of his girlfriends, beating them up pretty badly. It's amazing to me that the left is into this, believe everyone unless it's somebody we don't like.
Wow.
And of
Yeah.
course, we've got, radical jihadis in Congress who are all about destroying statues, destroying the United States, being sworn into Congress not on the Constitution, changing the rules. For 180 years, you weren't allowed to wear anything on your head in Congress, but these are the ways that the country gets changed. Elizabeth, I got to thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope you'll come back because there's so much more for us to learn about Venezuela, and we've got to keep our eyes on what's going on here in the United States. Any final words before we wrap it up?
No, I just want to thank you for having me. Thank you.
Wonderful. And people will be on the lookout for your next appearance. I really want to thank you very much for joining me. I want to thank everybody for watching, and I'll see everybody tomorrow. Have a great night.